In Union Square, if you look up right above Nordstrom Rack and Best Buy, you'll see a series of red numbers counting down. Right now, it reads something like 6 years, 70 days, and some amount of hours, minutes, and seconds. This is a climate clock. And others just like it exist in Seoul, Rome, Berlin, and Glasgow. These clocks are counting down to the presumed date at which our planet's temperature will have raised 1.5 degrees Celsius due to humanity's carbon emissions. Climate scientists suggest that this temperature shift could trigger a cascade of tipping points, which would irreversibly alter the global climate system and further exacerbate warming. This viewpoint is one steeped in the modern mindset. Modernity, the outcome of the European Enlightenment, focuses on a view of history as a continually straight line of progress, charted on human timelines, centering ourselves, our lifetimes, and our goals. This is often viewed in the positive sense, that we, as a special species on this planet, are always progressing inevitably forward. But it is not quite how the biblical or rabbinic world understood the nature of time or history. Our Torah portion this week, Bahar Behukotai, teaches a practice of connecting to the land called the Shemitah system, which in many ways runs precisely contrary to our modern sense of straight line progress. It creates 7-year cycles of stopping work, stopping growth, and after 7 of these 7-year cycles, returning all back to an original state, undoing anything that could be viewed as financial or wealth accumulation. God tells Moses, "Speak to the Israelite people and say to them, 6 years you may sow your field, and 6 years you may prune your vineyard, and gather in the yield. But in the 7th year, the land shall have a Sabbath of complete rest, a Sabbath of Adonai. You shall not sow your field or prune your vineyard." The cycle continues, and in the 7th cycle is the Yovel year, in which all things are returned to their original status. If land has changed hands between families, it goes back to the original families back when the Israelites first settled Canaan. If someone has become enslaved or indebted, that slavery and debt are canceled. Every 49 years, the society was to return to its starting point. 5782, or 2021/2022 in the Gregorian calendar, was our last Shemitah year. Perhaps coincidentally, perhaps not, the countdown clock in Union Square is very close to also counting down to the next Shemitah year, 5789, just a little under 7 years from now. The major cycle of the Jewish calendar is aligning directly with this environmental countdown clock. One of the most brilliant Torah scholars of history, Moses ben Nachman, or Ramban, sees within the Shemitah practice of our Torah portion a symbolic system of cycles in time that points us towards not just human social structures or human-centric histories and futures, but the underlying pattern of the cosmos. He writes, "The 6 days of creation represent the duration of the world, and the 7th day is a Sabbath of Adonai your God. Just as the 7 days of the week allude to God creating in the beginning, so the 7 years of the sabbatical cycle allude to what will happen during all the rest of creation. That is why the text is so strict about invoking a penalty of exile for violating it. And indeed, our Torah portion this week says if you don't follow this cycle, you will be exiled from the land, which we know did eventually happen. Ramban is suggesting that our entire universe works in these cycles of 7, starting with 6 days of work and then a 7th day of rest. And this continues fractally out in time. We have 6 years of work and then a 7th year of rest. And then that goes to the 7th degree as well with a complete societal reset. This system continues ad infinitum. And at the end of time will come at the end of 1,000 cycles of 7, in which the world to come, the Jewish phraseology for the Messianic era, will be established. There will then be 1,000 years of peace and prosperity, a Shabbat to end all Shabbats, which will then end maybe with a total return to nothing, maybe a start over, all over again, back to the Garden of Eden. In her recent book, Hospicing Modernity, Vanessa Machado de Oliveira writes about looking at stories so radically different from our normative modern viewpoint of straight-line progress through history, not for their literal truth. I don't know that I believe that after 7,000 years the world's going to end. But instead, we look at these stories as a process to think with. She refers to this as worlding, using stories as a guide as to how to be in the world. She writes, worlding stories invite us to experiment with a different relationship between language and reality. These stories do not require anyone to believe in anything. Rather, they invite you to believe with them. However, these stories cannot work on you without your consent. Taking worlding stories seriously makes possible a significant change in your ways of seeing, sensing, and relating to the world. So I invite you now to try worlding with this very different cosmology that the Torah and Ramban are putting forward. We have a little over 6 years until the climate countdown clock hits 0, and our next Shemitah year begins. What this cycle of 7s brought to us by our tradition teaches us is that time moves in predictable patterns that we cannot change. But we ourselves can change our own behavior within these patterns. By reflecting on our own behavior within them, we are able to change the outcome of the cycle. We may learn to do our own worlding with this story, to look at our tradition and its beautiful time map of cycles of 7 with great gaps for rest, rejuvenation, and a cessation to growth as the key to a vision for a future perfected with nature and with the divine, rather than the straight lines of human-centered history. Psalm 92, which is on page 64 of your prayer book if you want to read it, is viewed by our tradition, and Ramban in particular, as a song singing to life, this world to come. May we merit this future for ourselves and our loved ones, and may we find our own Shabbat, our own peace. Shabbat Shalom.